Good afternoon, everyone. I am Junaid, Assistant Manager at SHARDA LAUNCHPAD, DSC and I'm delighted to welcome you all to today's session of IGNIS 1.0. As most of you know, that IGNIS 1.0 is our flagship incubation program designed to support aspiring entrepreneurs like you in transforming your ideas into viable, scalable ventures. For the past 2 months, we have explored several foundation aspects ranging from startup ideation, business modeling, pitch deck preparation, value proposition design, and customer discovery. We truly appreciate the consistent efforts and enthusiasm shown by you. Your active participation is what keeps our journey impactful and enriching. Today we shift our focus to a critical yet overlooked area: startup essentials and legal compliances. Understanding legal structures, taxation, regulatory responsibility, compliance requirements is essential for any startup planning to scale responsibly and attract investors. These aren't just formalities, they are the backbones of your sustainable business. To guide us through this session, we have with us, we are privileged to have with us Mr. Shamik Ukil, a seasoned chartered accountant with extensive experience in both corporate and startup ecosystem. Mr. Ukil has advised numerous startups on financial planning, valuation, India entry strategy, and international tax and compliance frameworks. His insights today will be immensely valuable for every of you in this meeting. Before we begin, let's recap. We have received assignments for our last session on value proposition and customer discovery. Quite disappointing that only 10 teams from the participants have submitted the assignments. This is the final reminder for those who failed to submit required assignments. It will result in the removal from the program in accordance with the guidelines that we have already shared with you. For this session particularly, you all are required to keep your cameras on throughout the session and to ensure that the session looks more engaging and interactive. During question and answer, we'll be calling one each participant today to ask at least one question to stay alert and actively involved, and it will be mandatorily and strictly enforced. Before we dive into the session, this meeting is overseen by the team of SHARDA Launchpad, headed by Director Dr. Amit Saigal, followed by CEO Mr. Anurag Pandey. We have with us also Senior Manager DST IT by SHARDA Launchpad, Ms. Vani Kapoor. To take this off, I'd like to invite our CEO, Mr. Anurag sir, to tell us a brief overview about this startup compliances session. Over to you, Anurag sir.
Thank you, Zunad, and thank you everyone for your kind presence. So again, this startup session on funding and finances specifically is very important because Shamik's portfolio and his expertise lies in advising multiple AICs at incubation centers as well as in various ecosystem enablers, including 91 Springboards and all. So he has seen his company and he has seen multiple use cases where he can primarily understand how to decide which part of the company, which type of the company you should make, what are the challenges that will come through, how to overcome that. It's very important because today also, I have received a query where the person has a very good idea but doesn't know what kind of entity it will fit in. And that will become really challenging in future if you don't understand these things. So this session, please utilize your time very well. Ask relevant questions regarding your own doubts, and Yeah, so I think over to Shamik now. Shamik ji, if you can, further share your screen and start. Yeah,
Thank you very much for the introduction, Ramji and Junaid. Uh, Junaid
thank you,
very right.
Shamik ji. Thank you.
Yeah, Junaid very rightly mentioned during his introductory remarks that this startup compliances is an often overlooked area. It may be
Yeah.
important, but it is an often overlooked area. This reminds me of a startup who is currently raising funds out of Odisha, and you will soon hear about them in the news once it is out. There are many such startups who are raising funds who, during the due diligence process, face a multitude of issues because they had compromised on good quality legal advice in the initial stages. So, having a good idea is definitely, without a doubt, important. What is even more important is the execution. But hand in hand, if the legal compliances are not in order, there there a big there is a big mess up which happens at the time of funding, and that can become a very frustrating process. The case that I am recently monitoring, in that case, everything is approved. Every the funding decision has been taken. The IC investment committee has given their go ahead, but all of the decision is pending just because they are not able to clear the DD, and that is because last 3 years they were working with you know some people who were not privy to how a startup should operate, and many such non-compliances had already happened, and it was overlooked. So I think the importance of compliances do not may not seem apparently important at a very initial level, but it will definitely come back at a later stage. So for this reason, this session assumes significant importance, because what I understand is most of you may not already have a company in place, and because you don't have a company in place, you're in the best possible situation, and so you can do everything the right way. In this session, I will continue to elaborate on these points, but specifically, I would like to focus on a couple of areas. First is, what is the entity that you should choose to set up your business, that forms the foundation of all your future activities. Second is, when a due diligence happens and when an investment happens, what are the things that you should keep in mind? And then what are the compliances that you should consider on a day-to-day basis? Because I'm sure you will have somebody guiding you, but as they say that when you're doing business, you should know more about, I mean, at least you should be a generalist on all areas. Maybe you can hire a specialist to do specific things for you, but you should at least be aware about these things. Many compliances also, so that you can at least counter whoever who is advising you that I don't think this is the correct way, or at least maybe do some your own research, so that you will have at least some opinion about what is happening in your company. Now, coming to the first slide, here we will I will just broadly walk you through the different categories of startups. Sole proprietorship is a situation where you have no legal registration, but you have your idea which you are working on an independent basis, meaning you don't have any registrations, etc. The only registration you need for a sole proprietorship is to have a PAN number, which is your own personal PAN will also do. So there is no something very significant you should be applying. This model is used mostly by researchers, innovators who are building a tech product, but it can also be used, although I have not seen many cases, but it can be used for people who are doing manufacturing also. But it is not a very um, common approach of doing manufacturing business, because in manufacturing business, when you're dealing with vendors or customers, they insist sometimes to have a formal company or a formal setup in place. There is another format which is a registered partnership firm. It is different from a limited liability partnership. I will come to that. But registered partnership firm is when two founders come together and set up a partnership. Now, this partnership is based on an agreement that two people sign, and that agreement mentions many things. First is what is the name of the partnership, what is the PAN number of the partnership. A partnership firm has a different PAN number. It is not like sole proprietorship that the founder's PAN number will be used. It will mention the name, address, founder's name, the partner's name, the profit sharing ratio, what happens in case of a loss in a partnership firm, who will operate the current account of the partnership firm, what happens if the partnership has to be liquidated, has to be dissolved, what are the things that needs to be kept in mind at that point. Because this is a legal agreement, it should capture all of these aspects. Even if you cannot, even if you don't foresee a particular event happening, the agreement should still capture it. And this, I mean, this agreement drafting, I mean, you will of course do some Google and find out many samples for it, but I do not recommend relying on those samples because those are not tailored to your specific needs. Now there is a common disadvantage for both sole proprietorship and a partnership firm, which is, let's say in your current account there is 100 rupees, and you have to pay, let's say, 110 rupees to a vendor. The vendor can always insist that you pay the additional 10 rupees from your personal assets. So sole proprietorship and registered partnership firm imposes a risk on even your personal assets. So to meet your business liabilities, it is also quite possible that the vendors can approach you in your personal capacity to meet those liabilities. For this reason alone, the government had introduced a limited liability partnership as a format of doing business. Sole proprietorship and registered partnership firm also has certain other disadvantages, which I'll come to the next discussion. Limited liability of partnership was introduced in 2008. The number one positive aspect of this model is that it takes away that personal liability from you. So if you have 100 rupees in your bank account and you have to pay 110, the vendors cannot ask you to pay the rupees 10 out of your personal assets. This is the biggest advantage of a limited liability partnership. The second advantage is that it is much more flexible in terms of operations as compared to a private limited company. A limited liability partnership, you can change the terms of your agreement, and as you go, as you modify the terms and conditions of your agreement, as you scale your business, there are new partners coming in, there are partners who are leaving, you want to change the nature of your business, many other things are happening. So all of that can be changed by simply amending the partnership deed, and you just have to file one form to the government intimating that this partnership deed has been amended. After that, another advantage is that it does not require a statutory audit, meaning you don't have to appoint a statutory auditor under the LLP Act until you cross of rupees 40 lakh turnover. So till you cross a 40 lakh turnover, you don't need to appoint a statutory auditor. So that saves you some cost. That cost is not much, of course, but it still saves you some cost in the initial stages of your business. Now I'll come to two disadvantages of an LLP. First is that it attracts a tax rate of 32%, whereas other formats of business may give you a lower tax rate. I'll also come to that. Another disadvantage is that when you go to raise funds, the investors are less likely to fund a LLP than they are to fund a private limited company. Because LLP does not have anything to give in exchange. So if they are giving you 100 rupees, you have to give something in exchange. And as a financial investor, they have no interest in becoming a partner into your LLP. So in a private limited company, this drawback is addressed. So when somebody invests, let's say 1 crore rupees in your private limited company, you have an option to give them many kind of instruments. One of them is equity shares, another is preference shares, and then debentures. All of you would have already heard of these terms. Now, a private limited company, if I were to do a comparison ratio wise, out of 10 startups in India, 8 or 9 will be private limited companies and 1 or 2 will be LLPs. The primary reason is that a private limited company is more attracted by an investor because of the ease of investment. There is no difference in if the way in which you are carrying on business in case of an LLP and a private limited company. But from an investor's perspective, it is easier for him to invest money into the company in exchange for equity shares, preference, or debentures. In case of an LLP, LLP does not have anything to give in exchange. There is a legal provision. If you have an LLP for the next first couple of years, you want to say that I want to operate on a low cost model for the first few years till I am confident that my my business is going to run as I'm expecting it to. Till that time, you operate an LLP, and there is also a provision to convert the LLP to a private limited company. That is allowed legally. That is also possible practically. The only challenge sometimes is that when you get an investor, let's say you get an investor on 21st of April and they are intending to invest into your LLP, that time they will insist you to convert into a private limited company, and that conversion will take time, 1 or 2 months. If the investor is comfortable waiting for that much time, no problem, then you can do that. But if they are not, then there is a it is a practical issue that startups have to face, because we have seen companies, a couple of our startups were operating into that IDEX program, defense program, run by the Ministry of Defense, where they had an LLP. The IDEX program had recommended some investment into their LLP, and due to this reason alone, they have to convert their LLP into a private limited. Now I'll come to the practical aspect. The easiest form of doing business is LLP and private limited company. The disadvantages I've already mentioned. The private limited company is taxable at a 25% rate as compared to an LLP, which is taxed at 32% rate. But that to worry about this distinction is only comes into the picture when you're actually making profits. Unless and until that happens, there is no reason to be worried about this. Both LLP and private limited company are set up generally takes about 12 to 14 days to do the registration. The documentation requirement is the same. The Aadhaar card, PAN card, mobile number, email ID, one address proof. These are the basic documents. It is not something very difficult to get if you have a permanent address in the state where you are seeking the registration. Now, apart from this, there is another advantage that a startup India offers, that there is a tax exemption for any consecutive 3 years that you choose within the 10 years from company registration. So if your company is registered today, the next 10 years you can choose any 3 consecutive years. It cannot be year 1, year 3, and year 7. It has to be year 1 to 3, or 2, 3, 4, or 4, 5, 6. It has to be consecutive. So these are the different varieties of models where you want to do business. Now I'll come to the licensing part. There are few licenses which are necessary, which is mandatory, and there are a couple of them which are optional. PAN number and TAN number are necessary registrations, which we will get to which we will get it when we are filing the company registration itself. So at the time of company registration, that time only we will get you all this. GST is not a mandatory registration as is commonly believed, unless you reach a turnover of 20 lakhs in case of tangible goods, and supply of services in case of in for rupees 40 lakh turnover in case of supply of services, if you are providing services within the state. So let's say you are doing 39 lakh rupees worth of services within UP, then GST registration is not required. But if you are doing even 1 rupee 1 rupee of services from say UP to Delhi, then a GST registration is required. So this exemption of rupees 20 lakhs and 40 lakhs for goods and services is applicable only and only when you are doing services within the state. If you are doing cross state services, then these exemptions do not apply. This is again a common misconception that people have to achieve, to not seek GST registration. The exemption limit is not applicable if you're doing across state services. Now, importer exporter code, there is no requirement unless and until you are doing or dealing in export and import of any goods and services. Shop establishment uh, is an option, is a necessity if the state in which you want to operate has a state specific shop and establishment law. EPF and ESIC are again applicable only when you cross 20 and 10 persons as your employees, which generally takes time in case of startups. So till that time, you don't need to do anything. So these are the broad kind of so these what kind of statutory licenses that has to be taken care of. Now I'll just move to another point. Once your company is registered, there are certain additional compliances that has to be taken care of. First, compliance happens within the 30 days of the company registration. So when the company is registered, there is one more point that I missed talking about on the last slide. There is again a misconception that there is no compliances required till the time the company is doing business. It is not so. There are certain basic legal compliances that have to be done irrespective of whether you're doing any business in the company or LLP or not. The only exemption in the LLP case is to not get a statutory audit done. But there are necessary filings still to be done. Now I'm coming to regulatory compliances. Form ADT1 for appointment of auditors has to be filed within 30 days of registration of the company. It is a form through which you are intimating to the government that yes, I am now ready to appoint the auditor. It has to be mandatorily done within 30 days. INC 20A is another critical compliance that most startups tend to miss out. This, before you file this form with the government, no business activities can be commenced in the company. This means that unless and until this form is filed, you cannot even sign an agreement with anybody. To file this form, you need two things. First is a bank statement, which should reflect your contribution credited to the bank account of the company in form of share capital. So whatever is share capital you decide, you can decide as low as 1,000, 10,000, whatever you want to decide. But this decision has to be taken at the time of company registration. So to file this form INC 20, you have to deposit this money into the company's bank account. Second, this is a recent requirement. You have to submit 2 photographs in front of the registered office of the company, which should show the inside of the premises and also the exterior of the premises. And these pictures should show also the director standing in front of those premises. The reasoning is that there have been certain fraudulent filings which have been done in the past, which the government has now observed, and they want to insist that whether actual registered office exists or not. Annual audit, as I just mentioned, it is mandatory, irrespective of whether you're doing business or not. Form MGT 7A and Form AOC 4 are mandatory filings, whether you're doing business or not, it has to be filed. Then DPT 3 is a return of deposits. It is a very technical thing. If anybody has any questions, I'll answer to that. Just to briefly touch upon it, if you are putting in money into your company in the form of loan, then you have to file a return for deposits. Then Regular board meetings have to be conducted at least twice a year for a for an early stage startup, which is called small company in legal terms. Then, and minutes of the meeting should also be maintained on a regular basis. This is just a very brief snapshot of what you should do if there is no business at all in the company. There could be certain additional compliances which we can discuss on a case to case basis, but these are the very basic things that has to be done. Now I'll also like to touch upon some funding related aspects. In my previous slide, I mentioned that LLP does not have the flexibility of raising funds through the normal VC route, because anything you give, you take money, you have to give something in return. So this facility is only available in a company format. Now the instruments for raising funds could be either shares or debentures. Shares are of two types: equity and preference shares. The difference between equity and preference is when you register your company, you are taking equity shares. These shares are direct ownership in the company, meaning whoever is holding equity shares holds the ownership of the company on the date on which they are holding shares. But preference shares is not direct ownership, it is a deferred ownership, meaning this preference shares could be convertible into equity shares on the happening of certain event in the future. So preference shares is not a direct ownership of the company on the date on which this preference share is issued to somebody, but it is ownership on the happening of an event in the future. This term preference actually means that in the case the company is going bankrupt, whatever money is left in the company after paying for all loans and employee dues, whatever is left has to be first given to the preference shareholders. If anything remains, then it will go to the direct owners of the company, which are equity shareholders. Debenture holders are not owners of the company, but the only similarity between debentures and preference shares is that it is also a convertible instrument, meaning it will convert to equity shares or preference shares in the future, but it is not ownership today. Preference shares and debentures can be used interchangeably. Whenever you're raising any funds, you can decide to give equity shares or you can decide to give preference shares or debentures. In my experience, the process of raising funds is 4 or 5 steps. Firstly, the informal negotiations happen. You send out a pitch deck to somebody. They will schedule a call. They will have some informal negotiations with you. Try to understand the business. If they are interested, they will probably sign up for a second call. Well, they will do a more deep dive. You will have to do more some discussions, some demos as well. After that, a tentative non-binding term sheet is signed. Non-binding term sheet means just because you have signed a technical term sheet, non-binding term sheet does not mean that it does not bind the investor to invest into the company, or it does not bind you to take investment from the startup. It is just a tentative arrangement that is subject to due diligence. In due diligence, the investor will appoint their own attorneys or chartered accountants who will do a comprehensive review of your books of accounts. They will try to figure out whether all compliances are there or not. They will also try to find many things, but the ultimately underlying condition is that there shouldn't be anything which has happened in the company which puts the investors at risk at a later point, or it puts at risk the company's business operations, which could lead to a total depletion of the investors' money which has been invested into the company. So this is the due diligence part. Once you clear the due diligence, it is a simple thing. You just sign a shareholder agreement. The only issue that I have seen in the startups, which are very early stage, they tend to sign whatever is given to them by the investors. Of course, understandably, because they need the money. But if you sign whatever is given to you, you end up posing your startup to a lot of controlling from investors. So you should at least take some counsel from somebody who is experienced in this industry to guide you what is right, what is not, what you should accept and what you should not. Then you should go for amendment of articles, because there are certain terms in the SHA which might need an amendment of the articles of association. There are certain aspects or certain things that I'll just briefly talk about in terms of investments. Term sheets and deal structures. Now, a term sheet, as I mentioned, is a non-binding agreement that outlines the basic terms and conditions, so that both the investor and you are at least on a basic level agree that the investment, if it happens, will happen on these terms. Valuation cap is the maximum amount on which the convertible instruments, which is the CCDs or the CCPS, will convert into equities. Liquidation preference is, let's say, the order in which the proceeds of an exit event, meaning so if the company has happened at any exit event, if they receive the money, in what order will it be distributed to the stakeholders, whether it will be given first to the investor or to the employees or to the founders, that discussion also happens. Generally, the liquidation preference is given to the investor. The board composition is decided at the term sheet levels mostly, where they decide, once and if the investment happens, whether an investor director will join the board or not. Generally, board observers are not appointed at very early stages, and if investors will always say that you should have somebody on the board, but this is something, unless it undermines or it hinges on your flexibility to do day-to-day business operations, you should discuss this. Anti-dilution provisions are contractual clauses that protect the investors, basically who is putting your money into your company, from dilution. Let's say if on the date of investment of into your company, the investors will hold about 10%, and if you keep on issuing shares to yourself or to other investors, their 10% might become 8%. So the investor would also like to protect themselves to hold a sizable equity in your company. Therefore, they would like to introduce anti-dilution provisions. I know this is a lot of information, but if anybody has any questions, we can take up just after this slide. Just give me one moment. So there are
Hello,
different.
good.
Sorry,
Hello.
I'll just take a minute
Hello.
to then we can talk about it.
Okay.
Just give me 5 minutes. So there are different kinds of investors. Seed funding is when generally at the stage which you guys are at. It can be anywhere between 10 lakhs to 80 lakhs. 10 to 80 lakhs is the benchmark in India. At some time it can go up to 2 crores also. Most because this is mentioned as 2 crore because the funding deals nowadays, there is a passion to denominate the fundings in dollars, but generally in Indian terms, the seed funding is about 10 to 80 lakhs. VC firms are professional investment firms who manage an alternative investment. For example, they manage an AIF where the AIF has received a lot of money from many small investors, and this VC will then invest into a startup. Crowdfunding is not allowed for startups because these are private limited companies. You cannot go outside in the market and place an advertisement that inviting funds from the public to invest. That is not allowed. So, uh, so this is not allowed for startups. Some people are doing it, and they have been reprimanded by the government also. Government grants are non-dilutive funding, meaning these are just grants, as the name suggests. So they will not take anything in exchange, but they will give you certain grants for, let's say, achieving a PMF. Let's say accelerators are fixed-term cohort-based programs, and they provide funding and mentorship and the resources to scale rapidly. They might also provide you the necessary resources to expand to other countries. So this is what I had to share with all of you. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask. This can be a very critical starting point for you to know because you're very early at this stage.
There was a question in the chat box from Hardik Gupta. Is the sole obstacle to startup funding legal compliance? In comparison to private limited, is it simpler to obtain funding for a sole proprietorship?
Hmm. Okay, I understand the question. So If you're looking for formal fundings, then this is not feasible. Um, so basically, what happens is, in case of a private limited company, you can attract funds from anybody. But if you have a sole proprietorship, you have to rely on only grants. Just to take an example, um, there are certain Nidhi Prayas schemes which will fund solo entrepreneurs, but it is not so for everybody. So you have to find out specific funding schemes which give you grants. But in my experience, recently, not so there is a drone related grant happening from, I think it is DST. It is Dronagri. So they are also giving grants, but they are also insisting that you should have at least have a legal entity. But Nidhi Prayas, they give about, I think, around 3.5 lakhs in two tranches, or 7 lakhs in two tranches, something like this they give. But they also are now recently insisting on private limited companies to set up, because sometimes I think the concept the government has in mind is that it is not easier to track otherwise if you give grants to sole proprietorships. I hope it answers your question.
So generally, can you also specify, Shamik? I mean, what is the time period that generally takes to register in all these different, I mean, types of incorporations?
Sole proprietorship doesn't need any registration if you have a PAN card, so you
Yeah.
can start from day one. If you don't have a PAN card, it will take about a week.
Okay.
Now, a registered partnership, it will take less than a week
Okay.
to do the drafting of the agreement and to apply for a PAN card. I would say max to max 10 days. For a
Hmm.
company setup or an LLP setup, it will take about 14 days to have everything, the LLP certification, the certificate of incorporation, the PAN card, TAN card, everything will be done in 14 days.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. I see. And private limited, how much time it takes? Private
Same,
limited,
14 days.
that's a 14 days.
Yeah. Yeah. Process is the same.
Thank you. Yeah, you guys can ask directly. Yeah.
Hi, sir. Afternoon. Myself, Jiawala. I want to ask what is term sheet? I want to know more about term sheet.
So uh, term sheet is like an informal agreement. You would have heard of memorandum of understanding. It is something like a MOU that both of us are going to come. Like the investor tells you, I like your idea. I like the way you're doing business. You have told me that you have XYZ patents. So if all of this is true, I would like to invest. This is a preliminary expression of interest in your company. After term sheet is signed, basically the term sheet mentions many things. It can mention that if the investment happens, they would like to appoint a board observer or an investor director, and they could mention the what is the amount of investment that they're doing, what is the valuation, pre-money valuation, post-money valuation. There are certain basic things that they would like to capture in this term sheet. Now, this term sheet can be either binding or not binding. Binding meaning if you have signed the term sheet, you have to take the investment from them. But generally, in 9 out of 10 cases, only a non-binding term sheet is signed. So, in a nutshell, term sheet is just a preliminary agreement, non-binding agreement, in fact, to take investment and to give investment. That's all.
Okay, thanks.
Shamik, can you talk about also share a founders agreement
Yeah,
format
of
so
course.
that
So, founders agreement, I would say about 80% of the startups don't have a founder agreement. They don't tend to think this through. It is very important that you ask this question. So, founder agreement should happen ideally even before the company is registered. The day the name application is approved from the government side, you should get a founder agreement done. Founder agreement should cover a couple of aspects. First is, and the most important is what happens in case of dispute, and who is going to hold what, and who is going to do what responsibilities. Now, it is possible that one of the CEO is going after business, the CTO is developing the app or the software or the application, whatever, and the chief business officer is, or there can be different roles for defined for everybody. The common thing that we have seen is that the person who has larger equity stake wants to do everything. So the founder agreement should be entered before the company is registered. It should be notarized and it should be stamped, and everybody should sign so that from day one this is clear in everybody's mind. Also, if you don't have a founder agreement, the day you want to do an investment from an external investor, they will have this as a part of the agreement as a conditions precedent.
What if we are the solo founder and we are discussing with someone to be the founders, and we are still talking to investors for funds, and in that case, how
If
would
you have a private limited company, then there will be two founders. Then they might still insist that you do it, even if you tell them it was just for the sake of having two people, that I've involved another family member. They will still do it. They will still insist. But in the founder agreement, you can mention all of the responsibilities, day-to-day responsibilities as yours. But what I would suggest is at least mention some responsibilities for the other person also, at least some admin responsibilities.
No, but if the investor says, चलो ठीक है कोई नहीं, मतलब आपने family member को डाल रखा है अभी, they knew that okay, this family member is just for the sake of being a director, right, and nothing else, right?
Yeah.
And later on, once the another founder comes in, then there will be some terms between them. Even that you are saying that even after that we have to get this in place with the current director who is not a founder.
So what happens is that if the investor is insisting that you get a CTO, for example, then the family member will exit.
हाँ वो तो ठीक है, वो तो उनको वो दिक्कत नहीं है. मैं कह रहा हूँ कि अभी इन्वेस्टर से जो बात चल रही है जनरली वो सब दे आर ओके विद द स्टेज दैट वी आर इन, सेइंग चलो ठीक है कोई नहीं, कंसल्टेंट सीटो एक बार के ले लो, बट नेक्स्ट रेज में आपको लेना पड़ेगा. और इफ समवन कम्स इन देन बट still have a founders term agreement in place, in the sense that your company should have a founders agreement, and the moment the founder comes in then they sign those agreements. So do you have some copy of some sort of founder agreement that you can share that we can go through?
It has to be customized, but we have built this kind of contracts. So what you're talking about is the agreement between the founder and the company, and also an agreement between the founders is one agreement, and between the founders and the company is another agreement. Investors have been also insisting on this, so we can, it is possible. There is a standard thing, but it has to be customized.
अच्छा, अगर आप स्टैंडर्ड शेयर कर दोगे तो पढ़ लेंगे मतलब एक बार के लिए.
एक्चुअली इसमें ना थोड़ा कैच भी है, बिकॉज जनरली क्या होता है ना कि थोड़े ब्रॉडर टर्म्स हम मेंशन करते हैं इसमें, सो दैट ज़्यादा स्पेसिफिक ना रहे इन चीज़ों को लेके, है ना. थोड़ा ब्रॉडर टर्म्स रहते हैं तो वी शुड नॉट स्पेसिफाई मतलब एग्जैक्टली व्हाट ऑल, बट द केपीआई शुड बी ओवरऑल.
ज़्यादा भी बाउंड नहीं करना चाहिए ना.
हाँ, क्या कह रहे थे?
मैं कहा आपको ज़्यादा डिटेल में लिखने से हम खुद ही बाउंड हो जाते हैं उन सबको फॉलो करने में.
यस एग्जैक्टली, ये सब चीज़ें बहुत ही वैसे करना चाहिए. और मुझे लगता है कि इसमें कॉन्फ्लिक्टिंग पॉइंट्स मेंशन करने चाहिए कि जैसे इनकेस आगे चल के कॉन्फ्लिक्ट होता है तो नो वन विल पुट एनी लीगल एलिगेशन वंस मतलब अगेंस्ट ईच अदर, बिकॉज ये बहुत ही कॉमन होता है. वंस दे सी मनी पीपल थिंक डिफरेंटली, सो इट्स बेटर टू हैव सम अदर काइंड ऑफ सिग्नेचर्स एज अ प्रूफ.
ये कर तो सकते हैं, अगर एक्चुअली क्या फाउंडर जब जिस स्टेज पे हम करते हैं फाउंडर अग्रीमेंट, उस स्टेज पे ऑलरेडी हम इतने वॉलेटाइल होते हैं, वो फाउंडर अग्रीमेंट में जनरली जो लिखा होता है वो हो नहीं रहा होता.
राइट.
तो जनरली ये चीज तब फिक्स होती है जब इन्वेस्टर आता है.
हाँ सही, टोटली एग्री. मतलब मैंने भी जैसे पहले जो वेंचर्स किए उसमें भी मैंने देखा ये चीज़ की ऑल्दो चीज़ें बहुत फॉर्मलाइज रहती है, बट आगे चल के रोल्स एक्सचेंज होते हैं, रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी बढ़ जाती है, कोई दूसरा आता है तो उसको अलग स्टेक देना पड़ता है क्विकली. तो आई थिंक एक म्यूचुअल कंसेंट होना भी बहुत ज़रूरी है. बट ये टर्म अच्छा है, इफ़ यू इंट्रोड्यूस दैट टर्म इन इनिशियल डेज तो अच्छा रहता है. वी अंडरस्टैंड कि हमें उस दायरे में रहना चाहिए. तो डिस्कशन इज़ ऑल्सो अ पार्ट ऑफ दिस लीगल बाउंडेशन. ज़रूरी नहीं कि हर चीज़ पेपर्स पे ही करें आजकल, बट अगर ये चीज़ों को आपने अपने टीम के साथ डिस्कस कर लिया इनिशियल स्टेजेस में तो भी एक तरीके का कंसेंट तो आ ही जाएगा. मतलब दे हैव अंडरस्टूड, है ना.
एक बेसिक अंडरस्टैंडिंग तो शुरू से होनी भी चाहिए।
और मुझे ये भी लगता है कि जैसे जब कोई कंपनी बनाता है तो उसको साथ में ही रखना चाहिए कोई लीगल एडवाइजर, है ना, वो बहुत
डे
अच्छा
वन
रहता
से।
है डे वन से। ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है, कोई एग्रीमेंट करे ना करे, बट अगर अगर लीगल एडवाइजर साथ में है तो आगे चल के कोई भी कॉन्फ्लिक्ट होता है तो वी कैन सिंपली कॉल देम कि भाई देखो ऐसा ऐसा हो गया अभी। तो दोनों फाउंडर जानते होंगे उस लीगल एडवाइजर को, तो दोनों सुन भी लेंगे एंड मीडिएशन भी ईजी हो जाएगा। अदरवाइज थर्ड लीगल एंटिटी को लाना ही एक कॉन्फ्लिक्ट हो जाता है, क्योंकि
बिल्कुल।
जैसे मान लीजिए 5 को फाउंडर्स हैं या 2 ही हैं मान लीजिए, और अगर मैंने किसी पर्सन को ऑनबोर्ड किया ये बोलने के लिए कि ही विल डू द मीडिएशन, देन द सेकंड पर्सन विल से कि व्हाई ही विल डू, आई विल पुट माय ओन, दैट बिकम वेरी कॉन्फ्लिक्टिंग, जबकि कोई खास रेवेन्यू स्टेज भी नहीं होता, बट द
होता ही
थिंग्स
नहीं
बी
है।
कॉम्प्लिकेटेड।
ये तो बहुत ही अच्छा आइडिया दे दिया अनुराग. You have given a
या
good idea to Shamik. Shamik, why don't you start something called a LAS, legal as a service? हमसे आप महीने का 1,500 रुपए लीजिए और सब कुछ देखिए.
नहीं,
कहते कहते ना कहते ना
कहते
अपना अपना सी अपना डॉक्टर होना चाहिए। कंपनी तो ठीक है, कंपनी साइड में अपना होना चाहिए।
बहुत बहुत ज़रूरी है यार। इनफैक्ट मैंने ना ये सीखा है, ये वकील सर्च के एक वो थे, उन्होंने इकबाल को आप जानते हैं कि नहीं, आई डोंट नो, बट बहुत फेमस
फाउंडर है
लॉयर
ना?
है। किसके?
शायद इकबाल ही फाउंडर है
इकबाल ही
वकील का।
फाउंडर है, हाँ। वकील वकील सर्च का नहीं है वो, कुछ और वेंचर है उसका, मैं भूल जाता हूँ। बट ही इज सच एन अमेजिंग गाय, मतलब मुझे लगता नहीं था पहले कि टॉकिंग टू सम लीगल पर्सन विल बी दैट मच फन एंड ईजी। बट उनसे जब मैंने बात की, मैंने बताया कि ऐसा ऐसा है, तो बेसिक टर्म क्या रहता था ना कि जब मेरा कोई लॉन्च होता था या कोई पार्टी होती थी ना, आई यूज टू इनवाइट हिम, and that's how I used to meet my founders and my team members, and that's how the things got very good because he understood my team, he understood my working. अब जनरली हर कन्वर्जेशन में तो मैं बुला नहीं सकता ना उनको, और ना ही मैं पे कर सकता हूँ इतना डेफिनेटली। तो बेटर ये रहता है कि आप अपनी कोई लॉन्च में या फंडिंग इनिशिएटिव्स में उनको साथ लेके जाएं, उनका पूरा जो भी उनके जो भी कॉम्प्लायंस है या जो भी उनका फीस है वो बियर करें। फीस नहीं भी है तो ट्रैवल, उनके साथ रहना और उनके एक अप्रिशिएशन जरूर बियर करना चाहिए। आई थिंक
कभी
दैट्स अ
कभी
बेसिक।
जब इतनी लंबी रिलेशनशिप होती है ना, तो इट समटाइम्स बिकम मोर लेस अबाउट मनी एंड मोर अबाउट कंफर्ट।
मोर अबाउट कंफर्ट, आई टू 100% एग्री।
हम लोग लगभग लगभग 300 स्टार्टअप्स का काम करते हैं। ऑलमोस्ट वी आर गोइंग टू टच 300 दिस मंथ। अभी क्या है कि टिल डेट वी आंसर एवरी फोन। बिकॉज क्या होता है कि अगर हमारे पास फोन आया और हमने फोन नहीं उठाया, तो हमारे एडवाइजर होने का क्या फायदा है?
राइट राइट राइट। नहीं,
तो
अच्छी बात है, पता है बहुत रिस्पॉन्सिबल। मैंने देखा है इस प्रोफेशन में, जैसे जो आपकी प्रोफेशन है शामिक, काफ़ी रिस्पॉन्सिबल लोग हैं, दोज हु अंडरस्टैंड कि किस तरीके से चीज़ों को डील करना है ना, कब इग्नोर करना भी है, ये भी दे नो वेरी वेल, एंड दैट्स द ब्यूटी ऑफ इट। एंड आई थिंक एवरी फाउंडर शुड अंडरस्टैंड दिस कि रेदर देन फेयरिंग इट आउट कि भाई कैसे रीच आउट करें या क्यों रीच आउट करें, इट्स बेटर टू बी इन टच विद देम सो दैट टू अंडरस्टैंड। एंड शामिक जी ने बहुत अच्छे तरीके से सिंपलीफाई किया है इस चीज़ को। uh, in case you want to reach out to him afterwards, now the channel will be mailing the questions to us and then we will be connecting, or you can ask right now. He's here for 5 minutes more.
Questions are in chat box as well.
Okay.
And question from Shivam: what compliance aspects should I be aware of before raising external funds?
एक्सटर्नल फंडिंग मतलब आपके पास बेसिक जो कंप्लायंस है वो पूरे होने चाहिए, क्योंकि एक तो बेसिक कंप्लायंस का पार्ट होता है, जैसे आपके ऑडिट्स पूरे होने चाहिए, अकाउंट्स अप टू डेट होने चाहिए। ये तो एक एक सेगमेंट हो गया। दूसरा सेगमेंट होता है कि आपके सारे जो जब आप सेल करते हैं किसी को, उसका इन्वॉइसिंग कंपनी के नाम पे होना चाहिए। ये बहुत छोटी सी चीज़ है, मगर ये स्टार्टअप्स नहीं करते हैं। अब एक और मैं आपको छोटी सी चीज़ बताता हूँ। जब आप मान लीजिए आप एयरपोर्ट पे जा रहे हैं किसी बिजनेस मीटिंग के लिए, वहां पे आपने कॉफी शॉप से कॉफी ले ली और आपने अपने पर्सनल अकाउंट से पेमेंट कर दिया, और जो वहां से पर्ची मिलती है, छोटा सा जो बिल होता है, वो उस पर तो इंक ऐसी होती है, ऐसे करेंगे तो इंक हट जाएगी। तो वो रिकॉर्ड्स भी हमें मेंटेन करने हैं, क्योंकि है तो वो बिजनेस का खर्चा ना। तो क्या होता है कि हम लोग कभी बार कंपनी से कर देते हैं, यूपीआई से कर दिया और भूल गए। तो ये सारी चीजें बाद में जाके इम्पैक्ट करती हैं। इम्पैक्ट अभी पता नहीं चलता, जब हम डीडी में जाएंगे तो डीडी में ऑडिटेड अकाउंट्स पे भी लोग क्वेश्चन करते हैं।
सही पॉइंट है, बिल्कुल आई एग्री टू दिस। मतलब जरूरी नहीं प्रेजेंट करना, बट रिकॉर्ड रखना बहुत जरूरी है। रिकॉर्डिंग इट फॉर योर ओन सेल्फ, जब जरूरत पड़े तो यू हैव टू प्रेजेंट इट, है ना।
One more
तो
question, I
शामिल, एक सवाल था मेरा इसमें। जैसे
हम्म,
अभी हम मान लो कहीं गए और मैंने किसी के लिए सामान लिया, ठीक है। जैसे हम एक बार टीम डिनर पे गए थे, 3-4 हम लोग गए थे ऑफिस के। अब हमने ना, मतलब इट वाज थॉट डिडंट कम, मैंने बिल नहीं उठाया, कि जल्दी बिल उठाते नहीं है, लेकिन
हम्म,
क्रेडिट कार्ड से पेमेंट कर दी। तो क्रेडिट कार्ड में स्टेटमेंट में तो आ गया, अब वो बिल नहीं है मेरे पास, है ना।
हम्म,
तो अभी मैं वो उसको एक्सपेंस, अब वो क्रेडिट कार्ड से तो हुआ है, उसका दिख रहा है, नाम आ रहा है वहां पे जो भी खर्चा हुआ है, वो मैंने कंपनी के अकाउंट में डाल दिया। आई मेड द पेमेंट फ्रॉम ऑफ द क्रेडिट कार्ड फ्रॉम द कंपनी अकाउंट फॉर दैट पर्टिकुलर एक्सपेंस, राइट। अब जब
हम्म,
बिल में जब ड्यू डिलीजेंस होगा तो मेरे पास तो बिल तो नहीं है, बट वो
हम्म,
क्रेडिट कार्ड का वो वन लाइनर स्टेटमेंट है, चल जाएगा क्या? मतलब लेट्स अज्यूम ऐसे 2 ही 3 केस है, मेजरली
चल
केसेस दिए,
जाएगा,
बट
चल
हाँ,
जाएगा।
विल इट?
इट विल फ्लाई बिकॉज एक तो मटेरियलिटी भी नहीं होगी ना। आप कितने का डिनर किया होगा, 1500,
3,000 रुपये,
2000,
हाँ, 3-4 हज़ार मैक्सिमम।
वो टोटल स्कीम ऑफ थिंग्स में इमटेरियल है। बट एज अ मैटर ऑफ प्रैक्टिस हमें करना चाहिए।
हाँ हाँ, मतलब कोशिश करके बिल लेना चाहिए, ठीक है। ठीक है। एंड ऑल्सो इफ सम एम्प्लॉइज आर, सिंस यू आर हियर इन माई कंपनी, व्हाट इज हैपनिंग इज, कई बार अब मैं बिजी रहता हूँ और अब अकाउंट एक है, अब छोटे छोटे खर्चे होते हैं ऑफिस के कई बार। तो ना मैं किसी एम्प्लॉय को बोलता हूँ, यार तू कर दे, बिल रख लियो, और टेक द रिम्बर्समेंट, दैट इज ओके राइट फॉर नाउ?
दैट इज ओके, दैट इज ओके। यू कैन आइदर डू दिस। वो क्या करेगा, रिम्बर्समेंट फॉर्म आपको जमा करेगा, उसमें बोलेगा कि मैंने ये खर्चा किया कंपनी की बात पे, इसके पीछे के सपोर्टिंग डॉक्यूमेंट ये है।
हाँ,
तो आप
वो
करिए।
कोई
सेकेंड एक
दिक्कत।
और तरीका होता है, लोग इम्प्रेस्ड अकाउंट दे देते हैं। महीने के शुरू में 5,000 रुपये दे दिए निकाल के, और आप खर्चा करते रहो, हिसाब दे देना एंड में।
क्या अकाउंट
वो भी
बोला आपने, क्या नाम बताया उसका?
इसको इम्प्रेस्ड,
या
पेटी कैश बोल सकते हैं हम।
ठीक है। अच्छा, वो तो फिर पहले मैंने सोचा कि कैश विड्रॉ करके दे दूं 1,000 रुपए, कि भाई जो खर्चा होगा, बट उसमें फिर 1,000 रुपए का फिर कुछ होगा ही नहीं, पता ही नहीं लगे क्या
उस
खर्चा
टाइम
हुआ।
तक नहीं होगा, जब मंथ एंड में सेटलमेंट तो करेंगे। सब सेटलमेंट के टाइम पे वो आपको सारे बिल दे देगा उसका। उसमें उसको थोड़ा स्ट्रीमलाइन करना पड़ता है। हम लोग जोहो के थ्रू इसको स्ट्रीमलाइन करते हैं। जोहो में हम बोलते हैं कि भाई एक अप्रूवल प्रोसेस करते हैं कि उसने मान लीजिए आप खर्चा किया, उसने रिimbursement क्लेम किया आपको।
ठीक है।
तो हम अप्रूवल में ऐसा डिफाइन करते हैं कि जब तक सारे सपोर्टिंग डॉक्यूमेंट नहीं आएंगे तो अकाउंट्स टीम उसको ओके नहीं बोलेगी।
तो
क्योंकि
वो, और आपने एक्सेस एम्प्लॉय को दे दिया जोहो में चढ़ाने का?
हाँ, वो क्लेम तो कर सकता है ना। जोहो एक्सपेंस एक टूल है, उसमें अपने एक्सपेंसेस तो वो डाल सकता है
अच्छा।
क्लेम करने के लिए। उसने
जोहो।
क्लेम किया, आपने जैसे हम लोग क्या करते हैं, हमारे क्लाइंट्स के जो एम्प्लॉयज होते हैं वो हर महीने में ट्रैवल करते हैं, तो अपने
हाँ।
क्रेडिट कार्ड पे ट्रैवल करते हैं।
अच्छा।
14 तारीख उनकी क्रेडिट पेमेंट की ड्यू डेट होती है, तो वो क्या करते हैं, हमसे बिल डाल देते हैं। 3 या 4 तारीख तक सारे बिल आ जाते हैं हमारे पास। हम उनको 7 या 8 तारीख तक सैलरी के साथ पेमेंट कर देते हैं। जब पेमेंट उनके पास चलेगी तो वो अपना क्रेडिट कार्ड का बिल पे करते हैं, हम उनका क्रेडिट कार्ड का बिल पे नहीं करते।
we'll take a last question from here. Is there any registration fees for private limited company registration?
Yes, it is. There is about 12,500 is the professional fee, and whatever is the जैसे आप अगर आप यूपी में रजिस्ट्रेशन कराते हैं तो 1,010 रुपये की गवर्नमेंट फी है।
Anyone else from the participants? Any questions?
ठीक है, आई थिंक दैट्स इट। थैंक यू सो मच Shamik for your time, and it's a wonderful session. You explained everything quite structurefully, and I can say given a good emphasis on things. Uh, so happy to have you again. Let's suppose if we receive some inquiries from the participant after the call, maybe because this is a recorded session. So if they want to see some recording and maybe after the session they get some inquiry, we will be emailing you then, huh? And we'll be
Of
seeking
course,
your for the same.
of course, of
Uh,
course.
Thank you so much. Thank you
I
for your
would
Thank
presence.
you.
I request all the participants to switch on their cameras for screen capture.
Okay.
Thank you,
Additionally,
sir. Such a great presentation.
Samir sir, please share the presentation of today's session that we can send it to the participants.
Yeah, I will do that.
Everyone, please switch on your cameras. mark our attendance for the session.
स्वामी ऐसे चल जाएगा, कोई जरूरत नहीं।
सही है।
Jawlak Gaurav,
नहीं स्वामी जी, आप पहन लो, बेटर है। ये कुछ भी
Gaurav,
बोल।
Jawlak,
जी
कैमरा ऑन कीजिए।
ओ
ओके
Jawlak,
भाई,
सर।
कुछ लोग तो मतलब डिड समवन फॉल asleep ड्यूरिंग द कॉल?
I don't think
ऐसा
so.
अरे स्वामी पहन लो, मजाक कर रहे थे, फोटो लिंक्डइन में चला जाएगा।
Okay, give me a sec.
2 मिनट रुक जाना जुनैद, लेट हिम वेयर समथिंग।
चलो सर।
गुड सर, ऑनलाइन का यही बेनिफिट होता है।
आप कहाँ घूम रहे हैं? आप कहाँ पर है? मार्केट विजिट?
जी
आप कहाँ पर है? मार्केट विजिट कर रहे हैं तो पेड विजिट लग रहा है।
जी जी, नहीं मैं थोड़ा यहाँ नेहरू प्लेस आया था काम से।
अनुराग जी, आप इकबाल की जो बात कर रहे थे वो लॉयड वाले से क्या?
हाँ, लॉयड यार, थैंक यू क्लियर।
हाँ।
यू नो हिम?
आई थिंक हर co-founder was my school batchmate. I mean, Gauri.
अच्छा, ओके ओके।
Thank you everyone. Thank you.
Knows him. Strangely, whoever asked him knows Iqbal. Guy.
बहुत एक्टिव है।
बहुत एक्टिव है यार, सीरियसली सुपर एक्टिव है। ठीक है जुनैद, टेकन द स्क्रीनशॉट।
Yes sir.
Hello,
ठीक है,
am I audible?
यस
यूर ऑडियो।
Yeah, Shamik, I had one question. So I've taken legal and CA services from one company, Visa Express. And when do you think it's a right time to hire someone in your own company for that part?
I think when you're ready to pay at least 35,000 a month, because it is better to have somebody in house at least for the accounting part.
Okay,
और कुछ नहीं तो
and what should be the minimum experience that guy should have? Or
at least 3 years. At least 3 years, but you should put that guy in under supervision of an external CA. बिकॉज आप कितना मैनेज करेंगे? आप खुद काम भी करेंगे, दूसरे भी काम करेंगे, इनको भी मैनेज करेंगे, तो वो सब।
आप बस मतलब मुझे लगता है फाउंडर्स को पैसा कमाने पे ध्यान देना चाहिए। सीए फीस वगैरह बहुत कॉमन बेसिक चीज़ है यार। 30-40,000 तो हर ईयरली लगता ही है ना?
सही बात है।
ठीक है,
okay,
ठीक है,
thank
थैंक यू फॉर योर टाइम।
थैंक यू शामिक, सी यू मैन,
बाय।
बाय।
अनुराग, वो जो
क्या?
हमने डिस्कस किया था, जो लास्ट सेशन में जेंटलमैन आए थे आईडीएफसी बैंक से, कौन से बैंक से
हाँ,
थे स्टार्टअप
एयू बैंक से बताइए। हाँ
का कुछ अगर मेल वेल आ जाए, अगर कैसे इनिशिएट करना है वो।
हाँ, बस यार वो हमारी तरफ से थोड़ा सा एक लीगल क्लॉ अटक गया था, वो अभी क्लियर हो गया है। उनके तरफ से अब आई थिंक 1-2 दिन में वो आ जाएगा, तो आप सबको फ्लोट हो जाएगा। हाँ, वो थोड़ी हमारी लीगल टीम से साइनिंग रह गई थी वापस, बट अब वो हो गया है, वो आज हमारी तरफ से फाइनल हो गया, देन वी आर वेटिंग फॉर देम।
ठीक है, नो
है
वरी।
ना?
ओके,
थैंक यू।
थैंक्स।